My dear students, in this video presentation, I shall discuss a poem. The name of the poem is Milton, and the poem has another title. That title is London 1802. The name of the poet is William Wordsworth. So far as the genre of the poem is concerned, it is a sonnet. Specifically saying, it is an Italian or Petrarchan sonnet divided into an octave and a sestet. Now, my dear students, I welcome you all to my educational channel. The name of my educational channel is Priyankar Dotto. Here you will find video presentations on English language and literature of school level, college level, as well as of competitive examinations. Now, we shall move to the main focus of this video presentation, that is, we shall make a detailed discussion of the text of the poem entitled Milton or London 1802. Now, we shall move to the text. Now, before looking at the text, we shall look at, or rather we shall have to know about two things. The first thing is natural morality. So, it is very often said that in some of his poems, William Wordsworth has presented the theme of natural morality. Now, you all have some kind of a conception of morality. You know that morality is about right and wrong, truth and falsehood. Now, Milton wants that Wordsworth wants that his countrymen will come to know about these moral ideas naturally. That is, they will learn about these moral ideas not from precepts but from examples. That's why he wants to put forward some figures, some national figures who are thought to be embodiment of morality, and from that perspective, Milton as a man is fit because he is a Puritan. A Puritan is a person who is morally correct and living at a time when Milton is already dead. Wordsworth wants to present Milton as an embodiment of moral ideas whom his countrymen will follow in order to lead a moral life and uplift their moral standard in the process. Now, although recent critical approaches like deconstruction and even new criticism inspire us, if not instigate us, to look solely at the text and to ignore the background. But still, I feel that in order to know about the thematic thought current of this sonnet, you need to know of its background. Now, the thing which you need to know about its background has been quoted here. The quotation is not what is of my making. I have used the quotation mark because the words within the quotation are actually the words of the poet himself about the background. What he says is that, written immediately after my return from France to London, so the time is obviously 1802, when I could not but be struck, as here described, here means in this sonnet, with the vanity and parade of our country. So, what strikes Wordsworth when he comes back to England from France? in 1802 is that the Englishmen are full of pride as contrasted to the quiet and, I may say, the desolation that the revolution had produced in France. So, the kind of vanity or false pride which some of the Englishmen of Wordsworth's time, specifically saying of 1802 England, strikes the poet, and he contrasts it with the plight of the people of France because they have been badly struck by the French Revolution. So, keeping these two things in mind, the first thing is the concept of natural morality, and the second thing is what Wordsworth says about the background of this poem. So, these two things will help us to have a firmer grasp on the poem than what would have been possible had we not known about these things before reading the poem itself. Now, the poem begins in this manner: Milton, thou shouldst be living at this hour. Since the poem is entitled London 1802, it is acknowledged in the very first line or at the very outset of the poem that Milton is not alive in 1802. Truly speaking, Milton was born in 1608 and he died in 1674. So Milton is already dead, and Milton is expected by the poet to become alive, to be alive at that time. Now, as I have already mentioned, here the poet looks upon Milton as a public figure, as a human being, not as a poet. So, the main focus of the poem, or rather the sonnet, is Milton the human being, Milton the Puritan, not Milton the prose writer or Milton the poet or the dramatist. So, Wordsworth sincerely feels that he needed Milton at that time. That is, he wanted Milton to be alive in 1802. Why does he think so? It has been stated clearly in the second line. England hath need of thee. So, the poet tells that the people of England need Milton. Now, the question is, why do the people of England living in England or rather in London in 1802 need Milton? So, what would Milton do to them? So, it has been explained in the rest part of the octave. Sea is a fen of stagnant waters. Here, the poet says that London or England, whatever you may call it, has become a fen. Fen means a marshland. A marshland is a kind of muddy place. So, water cannot flow smoothly on the surface. That's why water becomes stagnant, and this stagnation of water makes the soil muddy. That's why the poet says sea is a fen of stagnant waters. Now, the comparison between England and a marshland is here an example of metaphor. Now you all know about metaphor. Metaphor is some kind of an indirect comparison between two unallied things. So if you are interested in learning about metaphor, you must follow my YouTube channel, where very soon a video presentation on metaphor will be uploaded. Okay, that is another matter. Now we shall move to this expression. She is a fan of stagnant waters. So water becomes stagnant on some kind of a surface and makes that land a marshland. Now England is compared to a fen. So as water cannot pass on some kind of a surface, similarly there is no progress so far as cultural and moral development of the people of England are concerned. Then the poet refers to some ideas. He tells that altar, sword, pen, fireside, the heroic wealth of Hall and Bower have fortified their ancient English dower of inward happiness. What the poet tells is that altar means the church. Then sword refers to the army. Pen refers to literary artists who write with the pen. Fireside means domestic life, the heroic wealth of Hall and Bower. So the heroic wealth means heroism which has connection with the hall. So hall refers to the palace, or it may refer to a large room which has association with medieval life. Then heroic wealth is associated with bower. So bower is the apartment for ladies in a medieval castle. So the heroic wealth of Hall and Bower. So Hall and Bower represent medieval life. Since heroism is an important aspect of medieval life, the poet, through the expression, or rather through the phrase, the heroic wealth of Hall and Bower, refers to heroes, patriots, soldiers. What have they done? They have fortified their ancient English dower of inward happiness. So they have fortified means these people have lost. Who have lost? The churchmen, the soldiers, the literary artists, those who enjoying, or rather who enjoy domestic life, and even the fighters, patriots, the knights. They have lost their ancient English dower. Dower means natural gift. What was the natural gift? The natural gift was happiness of mind, which was inherent, which was innate. They have lost that happiness, that peace of mind. So these people, they are thoughtful people, and they have lost the peace of mind. They are not happy with the kind of moral and cultural degradation they have seen among their countrymen. We are selfish men. The poet tells that those people who lived in London, in England, at that time, they are selfish. So Wordsworth tells that the people of his time are selfish. So here the word selfish means self-centered. What Wordsworth wants to mean is that the rich people of that time enjoyed the luxury of life, while the poor people led a miserable life. So, this kind of dichotomy, this kind of difference, this kind of breach in the status of life which pained the poet. That's why the poet tells we are selfish men. Oh, raise us up, return to us again. So, in order to bring the countrymen out of the shackle of selfishness, of self-centeredness, someone has to guide them, someone has to inspire them, and according to the poet, there is no other person than Milton to do this. Since Milton is dead and it is impossible to make him alive, the poet wants to inject in his countrymen through this poem the spirit of Milton, the spirit of a true nationalist, the spirit of a person who was above narrow personal interest, who was for the countrymen, who did everything for the betterment of others, who never thought of himself, who always sought and stood for justice. That's why the poet tells, raise us up, means bring us upwards from our narrow selfish thoughts to some kind of thought which is for the betterment of the country. Return to us again. So here returning does not imply rebirth. It means inspiring through ideals. And how can Milton inspire them? That's why the poet tells, give us manners, virtue, freedom, power. So the manners of Milton are to be imitated. The virtue of Milton are to be inculcated. The sense of freedom with which Milton protested against any kind of injustice he saw at his time. It may be on the prohibition of the freedom of the press or any other matter. So that kind of sense of freedom is what the poet wants his countrymen to have. And above all, the poet wants his countrymen to have the sense of power in his countrymen. So, in order to improve one's moral and cultural standard, one has to be morally honest. And this sense of honesty is what Wordsworth refers to by the word power. Unless we are honest, we cannot achieve anything great. So this sense of honesty is a must. Now we shall move to the second stanza, or rather the sestet of this Petrarchan sonnet. So the poet says, thy soul was like a star. Here the word soul has not been used in the sense of soul which is defined from body. It is not that. So here the word soul refers to the ideas going through the soul of the poet. The ideas going through the soul of Milton. So the poet tells, thy soul was like a star. So by the word star, the poet is possibly referring to the pole star which remains fixed. So by the expression, thy soul was like a star, the poet is referring to the idea that the kind of thought or idea which Milton had was fixed, and he did not succumb to any kind of external pressure. He stuck to his ideology, and nothing and nobody could make him change his ideology. And dwelt apart, the most important thing is that what Milton thought at that time was not the popular thought. So Milton went against the current and he stuck to it. Then in the next line the poet tells, thou hadst a voice whose sound was like the sea, pure as the naked heavens, majestic and free. The poet tells that Milton had a kind of voice. So whatever Milton stood for, that is the ideology which Milton expressed through his words and activities, it was like the sea. The poet compares the voice of Milton, the thought or the ideology of Milton, to the sea. So whose sound was like the sea. So whatever Milton said was as powerful as the waves of the sea. We all know that the waves of the sea are highly powerful. They will obviously jump upon any kind of obstacle. They will either cross it, and if they find the opponent to be less formidable, they will crush it. So the sea waves represent enormous power. So that's why the poet tells, thou hadst a voice whose sound was like the sea. So the kind of ideology which Milton expressed not only through his words but also through his activities was so powerful that it did not succumb to any kind of pressure. Pure as the naked heavens. So heavens means the sky. So sky is naked because the sky is cloudless. It is free from clouds. So whatever Milton thought did not have any kind of confusion. He did not hesitate before saying something or doing something drastic, doing something out of the ordinary. Whatever he thought was wrong, he opposed it, and whatever he thought right, he supported. So then the poet tells, majestic and free. So Milton's voice was majestic. Majestic means kingly, royal. So a king has the authority, a king has the power to speak anything, and it is usually assumed that whatever a king will speak, the subjects will abide by it. So Milton said something. Milton inspired the countrymen to do something, and that something was pure. That something was so noble that it had the power of a royal decree, and most importantly, it was free. Free means devoid of any kind of pressure. Milton did not do anything under any kind of compulsion. Compulsion in the form of pressure. So didst thou travel on life's common way. What impresses Wordsworth about Milton as a human being is that Milton established some noble ideals of life, but he did not ignore the common duties and responsibilities which he should have done as a law-abiding citizen. Here, one can refer to the fact that from 1639 onwards, Milton taught pupils for 7 years. So, as an educated youth, it was his duty to teach those who want to learn, and he simply did it. It was a very easy task. Anyone could have done it. But Milton did not leave it for others to do it. Whatever he did was simple, was common, but he did not ignore it. He did something special, all right, but he did not ignore the basics. That is what makes Milton a great human being to the estimation of Wordsworth. In cheerful godliness. So, whatever Milton did for the common human beings was done with the same sincerity, with the same urge, with the same interest with which Milton invoked God. Here, we must keep in mind that Milton was a Puritan. So, officially, legally, literally, he had a strong connection with God. So, whatever Milton did as his service to God was done with full sincerity, with honesty, with devotion, and he fulfilled his duty as a law-abiding citizen with the same devotion. And yet thy heart, the lowliest duties on herself did lay. So, whatever I have already told, that as a law-abiding citizen, an educated youth is expected to impart the light of education to those who want to learn, who want to be educated, and more importantly, who need to be educated so that the country improves. And Milton took upon this duty, this responsibility, and fulfilled it adequately. So, this is what I had to say about this sonnet. Now, from this sonnet, what you have learned is that the time when the poem was written, that is 1802, the kind of moral and cultural status the people of England had was far from being satisfactory, so far as the poet of this poem is concerned. And England, or speaking properly, the people of England needed a man like Milton to inspire them, and above all, to drag them out from the cobweb of moral degradation. Now, before I move to the final or valedictory session of this video presentation, here is an important declaration. I have opened a blog or website. The blog or website is priyankardatto.com. There is no space between Priyankar and Datto. And by going to this blog, you will find a post, or rather you may find two posts, and from those posts you will be able to find a detailed discussion of the poem and the related questions and answers from it. So, speaking precisely, you will find the word notes, the paraphrase, all types of questions answers, including multiple choice type question answer, and even the broad questions. And what is more important is that those questions and answers have been written in accordance with the latest syllabus of all school boards and universities, so the students are sure to be benefited from those blog posts. Now, I shall move to the concluding part of this video presentation, that is the valedictory note. Now, I request you to subscribe my channel. I want to tell you that I have found that there are numerous people who see and enjoy my video presentations, but for reasons unknown, they are not willing to subscribe to my channel. Especially to those persons, I request to subscribe my channel, because subscription simply inspires that person who prepares the video. So there is another request. The request is that share my video presentations to your friends so that they can also be benefited. Put forward your comment and your opinions in the comment section of this video presentation. I thank you all. See you again in my next video presentation. Thank you.